This is Reasons We Serve, a channel dedicated to those who serve. This is episode 100 with the Medal of Honor nominee and Navy Cross recipient, United States Navy SEAL R.J. Thomas. Jeff Cooper, the father of the modern-day technique of the pistol, once wrote, "A pistol is a weapon of astonishing efficiency and versatility when skillfully used, but its skillful use is rare. This is odd when you think of it, for while the pistol is commonplace throughout the civilized world, only the merest handful of men, now or in the past, have ever approached the ability to make it do what it can. A really good man, wearing a really good sidearm, is a serious, almost insurmountable problem for any person or group which contemplates his forcible correction. He may be safely taken with poison gas, a tank, or precision rifle under certain circumstances, and that's about all." On March 23, 1969, United States Navy SEAL Robert R.J. Thomas was flying in one of two Seawolf helicopters that were on a scouting mission near Nha Dang Mountain in Vietnam. As the helicopter approached the mountain, they came under heavy weapons fire and were shot down from about 300 feet with no time for the helicopter to auto-rotate. RJ was hanging out the side door on a gunner belt when several rounds came through the helo, fragmenting and hitting him in the chest. As the helicopter hit the ground, RJ was thrown about 40 feet from his helicopter. RJ was stripped of his sidearm, and his Stoner 63A machine gun had been bent, rendering it inoperable. He had compression fractured vertebrae and multiple impact wounds to his torso, knee, and hand, and his nose was nearly torn from his face. RJ made his way back to the helicopter, which was now on fire. RJ was able to drag the unconscious pilot, Dick Barr, from his seat and drag him away from the flames. It was at this point that the second helicopter landed and was able to drop door gunner Dan Reardon to assist, and both were able to get gunner Rick Abbott free and away from the helicopter. They were unable to save anyone else as the fire engulfed the helicopter. According to one observer, the enemy fire looked like a bare, dusty field that was being hit by a hard rain. The enemy began moving toward the survivors to kill or capture them. As RJ observed his surroundings, he realized that the only thing he had left to shoot was the pilot's 1911 A1 .45 pistol. The pilot had two fully loaded magazines, as well as a chest strap with an extra 45 to 50 rounds. Shielding Barr's body with his own, and using Barr's body and helmet as a stable platform, RJ began shooting the oncoming enemy. At some point, Barr regained consciousness and began loading magazines for Thomas as they went empty. One thing in RJ's favor was the fact that in order for the enemy to get to him, they had to come over a dike about 100 yards away. Each time the enemy would stick their heads up over the dike, RJ would shoot them. RJ was able to hold off the enemy for nearly 40 minutes with a handgun. A rescue helicopter was finally able to land, and as RJ gave a final push to load Barr into the helo, his back gave out and he fell to the ground. It was at this point that an enemy fighter had rushed to the front of the helicopter where there were no weapons. As the fighter raised his rifle to shoot the rescuing helicopter pilots, RJ shot and killed him with his .45. RJ was finally able to make it back into the helicopter and took over the gunner's position and the M60 machine gun. It was at this position that RJ delivered more retribution for his fallen comrades before the helicopter flew to safety. It should be noted that as the rescue chopper came in and landed, its crew noticed many dead enemy soldiers on the ground. Their distances from the downed helo were from about 3 to 150 yards, all shot by RJ with his M1911 .45. For his incredible courage under fire, the Army nominated RJ Thomas for the Medal of Honor, but the nomination was denied. The Navy declined because RJ was an enlisted man and believed the first Medal of Honor should have been awarded to an officer. Thomas was instead awarded the second highest Navy medal, the Navy Cross, after acknowledging that Thomas had only killed one enemy soldier who had charged the helicopter. In addition to the Navy Cross, RJ was also awarded the Bronze Star, Combat V, Purple Heart, and Cross for gallantry. RJ Thomas retired in 1995 as a commander. He won numerous firearms matches in the military and as a civilian. He qualified as a distinguished marksman with the handgun and rifle, and for years was acknowledged as the best shooter in the Navy. Thomas is known for instituting the Naval Special Warfare Sniper Program, and the people who worked for him say he was one of the best leaders they ever worked for.
Can you introduce yourself for me, please?
Hi, my name's R.J. Thomas, retired commander from Naval Special Warfare, and I'm now a resident of Idaho and have a little country home and happily living up here in the freest state in the Union.
RJ, how old are you?
89, sorry, 79.
79, okay. Give me a little bit of background. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Central California. My grandparents homesteaded in a little canyon in northern Santa Barbara County called Tepesquay Canyon. It was a very, very remote ranch about 25 miles from town, and that's where they homesteaded, and that's where I spent a lot of my time as a youth. I'd stay with my my grandfather and go up to the top fields with him. He plowed with a horse-drawn plow, and he cultivated fields up there and grew melons and grew some corn, and we grew a few cattle. We had Charolais cattle that we grew on the ranch. So,
How? Tell me a little bit about your family. Is it you spent a lot of time with your grandfather? Your parents, what did they do?
farmers. My parents separated when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I stayed with my mother, and she kept me connected with the family through my various uncles, and so I continued to do the rural life and raise animals, goats and chickens and cows, and that's what I kind of grew up doing. We had typical predators up there, mountain lions, coyotes, and bobcats, but they weren't much of a threat to the cattle, and so they were basically keeping away from the chickens and keeping away from the small animals.
So from an early age, you had gun in your hand.
I did.
What was your first gun?
Well, the first gun I was shooting was my grandmother's Ivers Johnson 410 single barrel shotgun, and that was a blue jay killer for shooting blue jays in our almond orchards, and they graduated me because the 410 shells were expensive, but when I was about between 8 and 10 years old, I got to start shooting the 22, and I was kind of my first marksmanship challenge was shooting those blue jays out of the tops of the almond trees with a 22. So that and all of my uncles were shooters of one sort or another, and both rifles, shotguns, and pistols, and they of course let me shoot their guns. And I can remember the first handgun I ever shot was a Colt Woodsman 22 pistol, and my uncle that let me shoot that also had a single action Army and 44 Special, that he let me shoot, and that was the first big bore handgun I'd ever shot. And we would shoot coffee cans off of fence posts were our targets when we were shooting the pistols.
So RJ, when you were growing up, you said your dad kind of left early. Who was your father figure? Was it your
Well, it was my Uncle Judson,
Okay.
Judson Munger, and to some degree, my other uncle was Frank Risner, and those guys were both up at the ranch, you know, and rural guys. They're both farmers and ranchers, so they were there, kind of a constant reminder of what a Western man should be. You know, things like your handshake is your bond, and you don't lie to people, and if you tell somebody you're going to do something, you do it.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about your proficiency with weapons, but do you think, I mean, obviously you had a gun in your hand since you were 10 years old or younger. Do you think it was, obviously your rifle was helping with your proficiency, your long range shooting. How important do you think that shotgun was in terms of movement and targeting?
I'm not sure what you mean by movement and targeting.
Well, so as opposed to rifle shooting where you're sighting in, long range shooting, it seems to me with the shotgun you're constantly moving.
Yeah, it's a moving target. It's 180 degrees out.
Yeah.
Truth be known, you point a shotgun, you focus your eye on the object you're trying to hit with a moving target, the shotgun, and if you look at the barrel, you're going to miss. So the barrel does have some crude sights on it. They call them beads on the sights, but that's just to see if you've got the gun in your shoulder correctly. If you're looking straight down the rib or the round barrel and you see the bead, you know that you're looking straight down the barrel is all. But you don't aim the shotgun. You swing the shotgun, and when your brain tells you you're at the right moment, overtaking a moving target, you pull the trigger and you get the moving target. So,
do those skills translate over to your pistol skills?
No, actually, the pistol skills require refinement of the skills you shoot with a rifle, in that you have to hold the pistol, particularly if you're competing, with one hand. So holding the pistol with one hand steadily and watching your sights and not disturbing your sights as you compress the trigger is a more difficult technique to learn than a rifle, which you can often rest on something or hold still in one way or another, unless you're shooting offhand, which most people don't do. But it's a much easier proposition to hold a rifle still than it is a pistol still. And of course, when I was learning to shoot a pistol early on, it was all one-handed. Nobody had developed the modern technique of pistol shooting. Jeff Cooper was pretty much a couple years older than I was, and he had not come out and started the Southwest Pistol League and all of the IPSC and all of that stuff. But I didn't really know anything about that stuff until I got back from Vietnam and learned about that stuff, and then I started competing as a combat shooter, IPSC shooter, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Any brothers and sisters?
I have one sister.
Okay. What'd she end up doing?
She was a nurse aide. She still lives up in Oregon, in Bend, and yeah, that's about. She never had any military connections or anything.
What kind of kid were you, RJ?
Well, I was I suppose some would say obsessed hunter. I hunted everything, varmints from squirrels, and jackrabbits, all the way up to the big game was in Central California there were black-tailed deer, Pacific Coast black-tailed deer. And it's the seasons in that part of California start in August and go through October. And it's hot, averages 90 to 100 degrees there. There's no water, so you got to carry your own water. They're not very high hills, but they're steep, 5,000 to 6,000 feet. And so you got to carry water. You got to walk up and down these hills in 100-degree heat. And then if you kill a deer, you've got to gut him, put him on your back, and carry him back. So it was quite a challenging hunting situation there, and I didn't really get into other big game hunting until I got back from Vietnam, and I suddenly realized how hard it was, what I was doing as a kid compared to what other guys did, hunting deer, for instance, or hunting antelope, or hunting elk. Or they drive in a nice air-conditioned pickup and get out and shoot an animal, go back to their tent and drink whiskey, So anyway, it taught me a lot of life lessons, and it kind of prepared me for a life of hunting, and I've been fortunate to be able to hunt all over the world. I've killed African game, and I've killed big game in Australia, the big Asian buffaloes in Australia, and Cape buffalo in Africa. And I've never had any ambition to shoot any large, like rhinoceros or hippopotamus or elephants, and I don't even care about shooting lions. I kind of feel like they're fellow hunters and don't have any reason to kill them. Certainly not going to eat them. So I've gone to Africa and killed the plains game plus buffalo, and it's quite an experience. It really teaches you something to go hunt those animals in Africa.
What kind of student were you?
What kind of what?
Student.
I was a great student if I was interested. I was good at writing. When I got out and went to college, I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and got a journalism degree. But I never had the inclination to be an engineer or do kind of heavy, hard science sort of things. And really, by the time I finally got the journalism degree, I was back in the Navy and finishing up as a career officer. So I never really employed it, though I did write a lot of magazine articles, and I've been published a couple times.
Did you always want to go into the Navy?
I wanted to go in the Navy because I was a free diver. Living on the coast of California there, I go out and get abalone and lobsters, langustas, and I thought, if I could be a Navy frogman, that would be ideal. Well, like I said, there was no mention of any SEALs at that time, so I was getting in the Navy. I came in the Navy just to be a frogman, and I succeeded in doing that. And
How old were you?
Well, I went into the fleet when I was 18, and I was aboard what they called a DLG, a destroyer light guided missile cruiser. And I spent a year on that, and then I got off of that and went to UDT training in '66.
But didn't you start when you were 17? Didn't you?
I did, but I just joined when I was 17, and then I had to go to Radar A school, and it was over a year before I actually got out into the Navy and was on a ship. And then
at 17, do your parents have to give permission for you to go in the military?
I think my mother did have to sign for me to go in.
Okay.
And the other thing was I had graduated from high school when I was actually 16. I turned shortly after that, I turned 17. But so I was behind the power curve for going to the Navy because they actually wanted you to be 18, and they come in at 17 with a waiver.
So when you join the Navy, is the Vietnam War going on at that point?
It wasn't. I mean, we had people over there, but we weren't admitting to it.
Okay. How long before you're in the Navy does Vietnam start? If you remember.
You know, I don't know what the official start date was. I think probably 65
Okay.
was the official start date, but we weren't, we were sending special forces advisors over there and doing stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any SEALs got there till probably 66 or 67.
Okay.
So, and there was also one UDT team, UDT 13, that went there. And
so you had mentioned that the SEALs were kind of a secret organization. So how do you go about figuring out that they're there and that you want to be a part of them?
well, they were the same place the UDT teams were.
Okay.
They're just in a different building.
Okay.
And it was a secret compound, and I remember when they finally decided they were going to announce that there were SEALs, they did it through the funny papers. There was a comic strip called Buzz Sawyer, and they started alluding to SEALs in the Buzz Sawyer comic strips. And so that's how they announced it. And then people would ask questions and nobody would tell them anything. But it was that was not just our mystique, but it really prevented people from figuring out how we did what we did.
Yeah.
So I remember one time a guy from Soldier of Fortune magazine was at one of our big exercises, and I had a SEAL platoon over there, and he started taking our pictures. And I told him, no, don't do that. He said, I'm press, blah, blah, blah. So my guys took his camera away and exposed all his film and gave him his camera back. And, he whined and pissed and moaned about it, but that's the way it was in those days.
Yeah.
We just were not interested in any kind of publicity.
Yeah.
One of the other things that stuck in my mind as a young SEAL was, and actually when I was in UDT also, were the guys who were scheduled to go to the Bay of Pigs. The UDT and the early SEALs were scheduled to go down and participate in the Bay of Pigs invasion. Kennedy had set that up. And the preparation period for that was they wanted plausible denial. So all of these guys that were tattooed up, they physically cut the tattoos off them and took skin off other parts of their body and put grafts on them. And it kind of was a eye-opener, not that I ever wanted a tattoo anyway, but if I had ever wanted a tattoo, that convinced me I didn't need one. They were ugly. They didn't do any plastic surgery on them, and they'd usually take a chunk of meat off their butt and put it on their arm, and so they had hairy patches on their arm where they'd taken this meat off their cheek somewhere and patched them up. But
so what makes you? How old are you when you finally? What makes you want to join the SEALs?
well, I mean, it was the obvious progressive step from being a frogman to being a SEAL, because I was at that point had developed a reputation as a shooter. That was, part of the mystique of getting over to the SEAL team was they were the good shooters. They had the best guns, the best shooters, so on and so forth. And there was some sort of process that they went through at the SEAL team, and I don't know that it was employed to any degree in my case, but if somebody at the SEAL team said they didn't want you over there, you didn't get to go. So you had to volunteer from the UDT teams. You had to do a cruise as a UDT sailor, an underwater demolition team sailor, and I went to the Mediterranean and did a cruise down there, and then I came back and put in my papers requesting to go to the SEAL team. Well, they sent me over in a dog kennel after they had my UDT platoon sent me over there as a departing gift in a dog kennel covered with purple dye and coffee grounds, and they didn't even slow the 6x down as they drove by. They shoved me off in the kennel in the 6x in the front of the SEAL team compound.
Wait a minute. They put you in a kennel and just kicked you out?
Kicked me off. Well, they were going slow. But anyway, they said they put me in a kennel because as they were holding me down to try to spread the dye on me, I bit a chunk out of a guy's belly. So they said, if you want to act like a dog, we're going to treat you like a dog.
So RJ, you said that they're pretty secretive at the time. Did you have any idea what they did?
Oh, of course.
Oh, okay.
We all knew. The UDT guys all knew what the SEAL teams did and what they were.
Okay.
But you know, they were a level above us, you know,
How about this? You said you had developed a reputation as a shooter.
Yeah.
Were there competitions going on? How did the people recognize
There were
you?
Navy competitions going on, and I was already competing in Navy competitions as a UDT guy, and I was doing well in them. And then the philosophy at the SEAL team at that point in time was that you didn't have to be a marksman, more or less. The secret was you had the best guns, like the Stoner that's up there in that picture, and the most rounds. You could carry more ammo, and if it came to a gunfight, you were going to have the best guns with the most rounds, and you were going to win the gunfight. But you know, I kind of changed that over the years, and you know, praised the concept of one shot, one kill, and you really can't carry enough ammo to waste ammo. So you just you got to account for something every time you pull the trigger.
Yeah. So what year, if you remember, and how old are you when you get accepted to the SEALs?
It was 68.
Okay.
And early 68. I went through what they called pre-deployment training before going to Vietnam.
How old are you though when you joined the SEALs?
I think it was 20.
20. Okay.
Yeah.
Back then, what was the training? Did you have a BUDS? Did you have something, or once you got accepted, you were in? What happened?
Well, we had what we called pre-deployment platoon training. We did not have the sophisticated training scenario that they have now for the SEAL teams, where they go out and they do some swimming training, some land warfare training, you know, parachute training. I went through Army jump school. Interesting little factoid for jumping. You get 5 jumps at Fort Benning, which gets you your Army jump wings. We called them the lead jump wings because the Navy jump wings were gold, and the Army jump wings were silver. So one of the big goals for everybody that was in the Frogman was to get their gold jump wings. Well, you had to get 10 jumps to get your gold jump wings. So we set up, when we were over in the Mediterranean, we did a jump out of what they called Capocchino Naval Air Station, and we set up for a jump in an old, I think it was a DC-3 cargo plane and we did a side door jump out of that. And I happened to have a little girlfriend that I'd picked up over there who was an American girl, and she wanted to see me do a parachute jump. So they said, well, she can ride out with the ambulance on the drop zone. So she rode out with the ambulance, and she was out there. And I was going to lead what they called the first stick out. We had 2 6-man sticks in the platoon, and we got out over the drop zone, and the jump master said, we got 13 knots of wind on the ground. It's you're new jumper. We better let the old chief jump first. And so they told me to sit back down, and the chief and his 5 guys that followed him went out to the side door and jumped out. And then they said, okay, stand up, hook up, go to the door, shuffle to the door. So I get out to the door, and I see something moving. I look back there, chief's hanging on the tail. His parachute opened and wrapped around the tail, and he's out back there unconscious. It was kind of an epiphany. I was not going to be a parachute jumper any more than I absolutely had to. So anyway, we tried to dump the chief off the tail. We couldn't dislodge him. So the next thing was they were going to land the airplane, which required landing at 90 knots on a concrete airstrip, and hopefully it wouldn't kill him when he was dragged behind the airplane. So we're flying back to Naples to the air station, and we look back there. Chief is gone. Parachute's still there. He pulled his cape wells, dropped, and he was going to open his reserve chute, but he noticed that his Rolex had come unclipped on his hand, so he's trying to clip that Rolex back on, and he opens late, and he barely gets his chute open, and he goes through a farmhouse roof, and it's a tile farmhouse roof, so it breaks his back and both shoulders. Doesn't kill him, but his hair turned white. And that was the last we saw of our chief. So,
At least he got his Rolex, right?
It was an exciting cruise in that respect, and but like I say, it gave me a lifelong respect for the things that can happen when you're parachuting.
Yeah.
And then of course, getting shot down in the helo and hitting the ground again just doesn't make me I'm out of my element when I'm high in the air.
Okay, so again, getting back to the train, was there an attrition rate for you then, though? Like
what?
An attrition rate. So now when people go through BUDS, there's like 75, 85%. What?
I went through 2 classes. I got my eardrum broken in hand-to-hand combat. And so they wouldn't let me finish the first class I was in because they afraid I would get microorganisms in my broken eardrum down in the Caribbean, Roosevelt Roads. So they rolled me back to the second class, and that class, that was class 38 that I was first in, and I graduated everything in Little Creek, so I did all the hard stuff. And they said, you don't have to do that with the next class. You could start up just when we go down to Puerto Rico. I said, you guys want me to roll back this class? I'll do it with this class too. I said, oh yeah, you want to be a tough guy, huh? So anyway, the psychological part of it was really the most challenging thing on training, and having accomplished it, there was nothing left to fear. You know, yeah. I mean, it was easy. I don't remember how many the second class graduated, but the first class I was in, I think they graduated 40 people out of 120. And I don't remember how many graduated out of the second class I went through. It would have been class 39, but they changed the numbering system to, my class was then renumbered 6701. So I started at 66 and graduated in 67.
Okay. When do you get deployed to Vietnam?
68.
Okay. What, at that point in your career, how many SEAL teams are there?
There was only two.
There was only
then,
two.
Yeah,
And
one,
you were
and,
in
one
SEAL,
and two.
and
I
you
was
were in two, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you get deployed to Vietnam. What's your mission? What are you supposed to be doing as a SEAL over in Vietnam?
Our primary targets were high-value Viet Cong infrastructure, tax collectors, trainers, advisors, stuff like that. We weren't really interested in just killing run-of-the-mill Viet Cong, that's however what I got in trouble doing was chasing down a guy called Captain Mock, who came out of Cambodia and would raid into Vietnam at Ha Tien. But yeah, the mission was basically psyops. You know, the CIA would have us look for certain people, and if we could capture them, they would interrogate them, try to turn them. That was the primary thing they were sending us for. We weren't looking to engage a battalion or anything.
Yeah.
So we were out of our element. If we were fighting any more than 20 or 30 people, we were in a lot of trouble.
Okay.
We had to call for help to bail us out.
SEAL Team 2, tell me how many total guys you had at that time that were with you.
I've heard varying numbers, but it was between 200 and 250.
Okay. Okay. So you get stationed in Vietnam. What's your day in, day out like? Are you go out? You doing ops every day? You doing night stuff? What are you doing?
Yeah, we only went out at night.
Okay.
And if we got overstayed for some reason, like an ambush or something in the daylight, we were very cautious to get out of there before we got compromised, because, like I said, if they brought a lot of people in, they were going to win. And we could almost tell when that was going to happen, because when we hit them when they were unexpecting it, they would break and run invariably. If they stayed and fought, they knew they had more people than you did. So you had to beware of that and try to get out of there. And that's where we were always had the Sea Wolves on call to come and bail us out, to fly in there and give us some air cover so we could get back to a canal and get a boat and get on a boat and get out of there.
And can you explain to the audience who are the Sea Wolves?
Sea Wolves were HAL 3, Helicopter Attack Light 3, which was a helicopter squadron that they put up just for Vietnam. They got old tired Army Hueys and built them into gunships, and they put 50s and M60 machine guns on them, and a few of them had miniguns, but those were later birds. I never saw a minigun on a HAL 3 bird when they were there. But
Okay.
they were basically on call to support the SEAL team. And then, of course, we had the riverboat guys that delivered us on the rivers and canals, and we also had riverboat guys driving a SEAL-specific boat. Well, we had several, but when I was there, the SEAL support boat was called an LSSC, Light SEAL Support Craft. It had two Ford 427 V8s in it, and it was pumping on 2 jacuzzi pumps. And it would do 50 knots over about 3 inches of water.
Wow.
So that was, the boat had no guns. the SEALs in the boat were the guns. So once the SEALs bailed off the boats, they were pretty much defenseless except for, an M60 machine gun or two that they would have on the boats. But that was the concept that we would, if they got attacked by somebody, the SEALs in the boat would defend them.
So when you would go out on operations, RJ, what was your typical? You have a sidearm and a rifle. I mean, tell me what you were normally carry day to day.
Yeah. I had a Smith & Wesson Model 39 9mm pistol and a shoulder holster. I had the Stoner 63A submachine gun or machine gun. It's a 5.56 with a 100-round drum in it. And those guns were only given to SEALs. No other military unit ever had a Stoner except SEALs. I carried a standard Navy K-bar, which Navy fighting knife.
Yeah.
We had always carried a K-bar with a emergency flare on it. So if you were out in the water and at night and a boat was coming to pick you up, you could pop that flare and they could see you in the water, not run over you. So I carried 600 rounds of ammo wrapped around, bandoliered around my body, and I carried a 100-round drum in the gun. So I was loaded up. I was carrying 700 rounds.
How about your handgun? How many rounds you have there?
I had 2 mags, in the gun.
Mm-hmm.
One spare mag,
Yeah.
one in the gun.
Okay. Can you, if you can say, in Vietnam, what area did you operate in?
Well, we were basically in the, around the Mekong Delta, and all over it. There was no particular area that we were assigned to. The big kind of zone that if you were caught in there was going to be shooting was called the Plain of Reeds, and we went there several times. Actually, we never ran into anybody there. So, but we would get intelligence that there would be a tax collector, for instance, coming in on a certain night to a certain village, and we would set up an ambush and try to either capture or kill him. One time we had set up for an ambush on what they called Snoopy's Nose, and the canal, we would set up on the canal basically at low tide at first darkness, and then the tide would come in, and the tide was the highest is when they would come in the dark. When the tide was the highest, they would move their sampans through, and we saw a sampan coming, and we didn't do anything because we thought perhaps there was something else, because the first sampan was all guns, and usually it would be a sampan with 2 or 3 guys in it and maybe 1 passenger, but this time first sampan came by, it's like 8 or 10 guys in this sampan, all with guns, and then another sampan came by with it looked like Buddha sitting in it, a great big fat guy sitting in it, and 2 or 3 guys with guns, and then a third sampan was coming full of guns again. So we recognized that we had a special situation there, so we waited till they started around the corner, and we hit the center guy and then got the 2 end guns. We got them all. We went out and swam out to the boat, and the big guy was gone, he sunk. But we got all his paperwork. He was a Russian instructor teaching them how to shoot 122 missiles off of bamboo launching ramps. Had all of his lesson guides in Russian there. He had little, like a New Testament with Lenin's preachings on them. And he had a giant, beautiful hammer and sickle red satin flag with a gold hammer and sickle on it. So that was probably our best hit ever. So, but that was, you know, we didn't have any intelligence. We just knew that they were going to be working that night.
Yeah.
And we got that guy.
So, March 23rd, 1969, you're involved in an incident that is pretty famous, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what happened?
Yeah, we had gotten a tasker to go up and hunt this guy, Captain Mock, who was coming over from Cambodia. There was a mountain over there that was full of caves in Cambodia, and it was actually a Buddhist sanctuary. And these guys would come over to a little rice-growing village there called Ha Tien, and they would demand whatever they wanted. They would take young boys and take them back and train them up to be VC, or they take women and do what they do with women, and take food. And if they got any village resistance, they would go back and they would mortar the town. Send a couple of mortar rounds over there. They were close enough from the Cambodian to the Vietnamese side that they could hit the town with a mortar. So people were scared to death of them. So they asked if we could come up and help them. So we came up, and we had a couple of Seawolf helicopters supporting us, and we'd been up there about 2 days, and the Seawolves came flying back, and they said, "They're out. We can see them." And I said, "Can you tell me which cave they're coming out of?" And they said, "No, come get on the helicopter with us." So I grabbed my Stoner and my Model 39 and jumped on the helo with them, and we start flying over there. And of course, now this mountain's in Cambodia. We're not supposed to fly into Cambodia. We're supposed to stay in Vietnam. So people don't know it, but when they see these Hueys shooting rockets during Vietnam, it looks like it's kind of point and shoot, but it's really not. They've got actual sights drawn on their windscreen that they got to look through to have the rockets go where they want them to go. And to get the sights to work, they have to be going like 90 knots and dropping at 120 feet per minute. So they've got to come in and drop and stay on a straight line for the rockets to hit where they want. So we come flying in there, and just the whole sky is full of tracers. I mean, it's like some kind of movie. These things look like big green footballs going by everywhere, and I'm thinking, we're going to get shot down. And so we fly in there, shoot rockets, bank around, and do about a 2 or 3 minute turnaround and come back. And he says, "We got the X number of rockets left." Dick Barr, the guy that was flying.
We came in, we made one pass, and we took quite a bit of fire from the mountain. And we came back around again for another pass, and we came in and I shot some more rockets.
We're going to really screw them over, So we immediately, they had dialed us in by then. We got hit.
At the same time, we felt a real heavy hit. I called on the radio to my wingman. I said, "We're hit, we're going down."
And we were between 300 and 500 feet. He said, "We're hit." Well, it was pretty obvious to everybody because the helo was shuddering and rolling around.
The helo fell from somewhere between 500 and 300 feet, and there was no opportunity to auto-rotate or do any of the evasive things that a helo does.
We hit the ground really hard. I remember hitting the ground extremely hard.
It apparently launched me out through the side door, broke the gunner's belt, stripped my web gear and H harness off me, including my sidearm, and I hit some distance away from the helicopter out in the rice paddy, which was dry, hard clay.
We're hit, we're going down, and I looked out the side door and I saw a banana tree. Banana trees are only about 10 or 15 feet tall, so I knew that we were going to hit the ground hard. I mean, I was looking out there, and then we hit, and it threw me out of the gunner's belt and tossed me out into the field and knocked me out.
But you had been hit by shrapnel, hadn't you, at this
Well,
point?
I had been, but I didn't realize when or what was going on. Everything was happening so quickly there that I didn't recognize the fact that I'd been hit. But when I came to out in the field, I didn't realize that I'd fallen over, but the other helo pilot said that I stood up, fell over, and then I stood up again, and then I started walking back toward the helo, which was on fire. And as I started to walk, my pants fell off. And I'm trying to hold on. It had broken all my web gear and H harness, and there was no belt. So my pants were falling off, and my nose was running. So I reached up to wipe my nose, and my nose just flopped over on the side of my face. It had cut my nose completely loose, and something, probably my binoculars or something in the helo, had cut me from over my eyebrow down around my nose, and my teeth had come through my bottom lip. And so I was pretty much a bloody mess. But anyway, I was conscious, and I went back to the helo, which was starting to burn, and I went to the pilot first, it was Dick Barr, and he was hanging there unconscious. So I released him and drug him out and got him away from the helo, and probably 15 or 20 feet from the helo. And then we had the second helo come down. It was a two-gun mission, and they dropped a guy named Reardon out, a second class named Reardon, Dan Reardon. And he came out to help me, and we started getting the gunner, who was also unconscious, over the 50. And we got him out, and then bullets started hitting all around us, and we looked, and there were about 12 or 14 guys coming across the rice paddies directly toward us. So we drugged Abbott out, and we tried to get the pilot out, but the co-pilot out, but he was stuck between the two seats, and the fire then was pretty much consuming the whole helicopter. So we kept trying to pull him out. Reardon was standing on the rocket pod, and the rocket pod cooked off and blew him up through the air. It didn't hurt him, but it threw white phosphorus, Willie Peter, all through the air, and it really set the helicopter on fire. So we left two guys in the helo there that we never got out, that burned up. So anyway, then we were looking at these advancing guys coming across the rice paddy. They were 150, 170 yards away, and they were shooting at us. So I went over to Dick Barr, and I'd found my stoner. My stoner was bent like a horseshoe, so it was out of the fight. My pistol was gone, so I got this old 1911 that Barr had in his shoulder holster, and he had 2 magazines loaded and 1 magazine loaded in the gun, and then 50 rounds in loops, cartridge loops, on his shoulder holster. So he's still unconscious, and so I got his 1911 out, and I'm laying on him, and I'm waiting for these guys to get close enough to shoot, and one of them gets up to a dike and stands up on the dike and is shooting at us, so I shoot him.
Petty Officer Thomas was laying across my shoulder with the .45 and literally just aiming and shooting and killing a VC almost with every round. He killed a number of them with that .45.
And then they all dropped down behind the dike, and they're shooting at us from behind the dike. And they're about 75 yards away. And so they would shoot. They wouldn't keep their heads up. They'd shoot, and they would stick their heads up to see if they hit us. And I'd shoot them in the head. I didn't hit them every time, but I hit them enough of the time that they quit doing it. So
From 75 yards away.
yeah, not hard when you know how to do it. Yeah. Sounds just like hitting a watermelon when you hit them in the head. But anyway, the Army slick took about 30 minutes to find us. He heard our mayday when we went down.
This was an ample opportunity for me to exercise all my marksmanship training through the years. This is what we call a target-rich environment. And the proof of the pudding was the fact that, you know, I kept 12 to 15 guys from overrunning and killing us with a handgun while they all had shoulder arms.
And he came in to assist us and pick us up, and he started to land next to us, and they hit him with so much fire that he turned around and left. I didn't realize it, but they had hit the main pilot, and they hit him in his leg, and his femoral artery was squirting blood up on the overhead of the helo, and they also hit him through the cheek, and it came out his jaw and knocked him out. So the co-pilot flew around and assessed the damage to the helo, and then he came back and landed, actually set it down on the ground about 20 or 30 feet from where we were dragging out the gunner and the pilot. And at that point in time, they got brave and they charged the front of the helo, which was has an exposed plexiglass front, but there's no guns out the front. So they came charging up the front, and one guy came around the side. The pilot was shooting at him with a grease gun out the side door, and as I was shoving Dick Barr into the helo, I kind of lost my footing and fell down, and I saw this guy charging at the front of the helo, so I just shot him right in front of the helo with Barr's 45.
And he literally rolled over, typical John Wayne type, just rolled over that 45 and shot the guy with one shot. Just picked the guy up. I'll never forget, the guy just blew the guy away, literally.
When they when they debriefed me later on back at home, they said, "Well, how many guys did you kill?" And I said, "Oh, I don't really know." I said, "There was 10 or 12 of them out there, and the only one I know I killed for sure was the guy that was right in front of the helo. He was laying there dead after I shot him. But and then after we finally took off, there was an M60 on the slick, so I had the M60 in my hands now, and they were all exposed.
I felt that it was a terrific opportunity to have an advantage on these guys that had been trying to kill me for the last 40 minutes, so I wanted to stick around and deal with them with the door gun, and there was some argument between me and the 06 about whether we should stay or go, but ultimately he prevailed. So we didn't get to do much damage with the door gun, though I did get a few licks in.
So I was cleaning them up then, and I don't know how many more I killed there, but I laid out a bunch of them. And so, you know, the body counts, you know, depending on who's telling the story, they said there was bodies laying all over, but there was no more than maybe between 10 and 15 guys that were around there. And they had split into two groups. One of them was coming right at us, and one came around behind the helo and tried to flank us. And they shot Reardon in the leg while he was over there dragging the gunner out. So
As you're holding these guys off with a 1911 45, what is Reardon doing? Because there's
he's holding them off from the ones coming around the back. He's shooting at them.
Okay.
I don't know. He passed away, so I don't really know how successful he was.
Okay.
But he was successful enough that he got Abbott back to the helo, and both of us, all four of us, got on the helo and flew out of there.
So there was one account that I had read before. It's like as you're shooting that guy in the front that's attacking the front of the helicopter, there was some account that your back had given out. Is that true?
As I didn't realize it, but I had a compression fractured back.
Okay.
And as I was lifting Barr into the helo and shoving him in on the deck, I just collapsed. I just fell on the ground, and I still had the gun in my hand. And, you know, I was laying on the ground, and there was a guy looking through the skids. There was that guy running at us. So it was, you know, it was all...
Is that...
Yeah.
There was a quote that was attributed to you about something about a banana.
Yeah, well, you know, it speaks to my state of mind.
Yeah.
My Portuguese grandmother, when she was going to chide me about something, she'd always call me a banana. And that, I didn't realize I had said it, but the pilot said, you laughed and said, "Look, did you see that banana?" You know, when I shot him.
Yeah.
You know, I was obviously in shock, and what my mental state was.
Yeah.
You know, I was kind of.
How do you, what do you attribute it to? Do you attribute it to your training or something in your own personality that you kept your head level, you calm during the whole thing? I mean,
You know, it was interesting when they first told me that. Well, they came to the hospital and said I was going to get the Medal of Honor. The platoon commander came in and told me that. He says, you know, the Army pilot's going to put you in for the Medal of Honor. I said, what for? He says, well, you're a hero. I said, I was? I said, they were trying to kill me. I was just trying to keep them from killing me. You know, I mean, there was no heroic decisions to be made. I mean, they were trying to get me. I was trying to keep them from getting me and the guy were survivors. So there weren't any options in there where you had to make decisions.
Yeah.
To you know, decide. You couldn't run away.
Right.
There's no place to run to. You had to stay there and fight. So, and that was, of course, that was the you know, the mentality of SEALs and frogmen at the time. You know, you just, you're going to dominate. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And it just happened that I had the background to be in that place and at that time to do what I did. And I have no doubt that there was a you know, a supreme being who was in charge of this whole thing. I mean, it's not something that just happened. This was preordained, in my opinion, that it was going to be me and I was going to be there. So.
Okay, so you don't just get put in once, you get put in twice for the Medal of Honor.
I don't know that I was ever put in officially for the Medal of Honor, though the newspapers said I was. But the pilot that flew the helo back was injured, but not severely. So he did not go to the medevac hospital with the pilot who was injured severely and I. And then the platoon came and visited me in the hospital, and they said, well, the pilot, who was actually the co-pilot, Kent, and he said he's going to put me in for. Well, it went into the Army's chain of command,
Right.
And they said their typical service response was, "What the hell was that Navy helicopter doing in our AO?" and what were you doing flying that close to the Cambodian border. They were supposed to be a 1 mile minimum offset of the Army helos from the Cambodian border. We were right on the Cambodian. I mean, you could throw a rock to the Cambodian border.
Yeah.
So there was politics involved there with areas of operation violating each other. And then the final thing was every service is allotted X number of Medal of Honors.
Right.
The Army general said, these Navy guys want to give that sailor a Medal of Honor, they can give him the Medal of Honor. We're not giving him anything. And they forwarded the information to the Navy. That situation becomes very gray. And I don't know who did or didn't do anything with that write-up, but I got interviewed months later, and the guy said, well, how many guys did you kill? And I said, well, I don't know exactly how many I killed. Only one I could say for sure was the guy that was laying right in front of the helo. Mm-hmm. And I said, the rest of them were scattered all over the place. So I didn't know. Well, somehow that got translated into there was one bad guy.
Yeah.
And from there, it went.
But at least
through the process.
But at least part of the explanation given in multiple things that I've read is they didn't want to give it to you because they wanted to give it to an officer first.
Well, there was that aspect to it. The SEAL Team 2 was in the Atlantic Fleet. Vietnam was the responsibility of the Pacific Fleet. So any awards given to people from the Atlantic Fleet had to be approved by the Atlantic Fleet. Well, there had been no officer Medal of Honor winners from the Atlantic Fleet, either in the riverboats or in the teams, UDT teams or SEAL teams. So they were screening operations for a potential Atlantic Fleet Medal of Honor winner. And one of the guys at SEAL Team 2 told me that don't believe all this stuff about you're going to get the Medal of Honor, because you're not going to get it because there's no Atlantic Fleet Medal of Honor winners yet, and they're not going to do it with an enlisted man. So, yeah, just politics.
You're awarded the Navy Cross, the Bronze Star, Combat V, Purple Heart, and Cross for Gallantry.
Yeah,
Those
that's
are all
a Vietnamese award.
Okay, but those
Gallantry
are all awards that you get because of your time in Vietnam.
Yeah, but not specifically related to that incident.
Right.
There's just the Navy Cross was related to that specific incident.
And the Navy Cross is the highest award you can get in the Navy. Besides
the Medal of Honor is the highest.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
Besides the Medal of Honor.
The second highest.
Okay, second highest.
Navy Cross.
Okay. So RJ, you basically, you're recovering, and accounts in books that I'm reading is that's probably the hardest thing is physical therapy as you're recovering in the hospital. But as you're recovering, you decide you're going to go compete. What in a rifle competition? What happens?
Well, it was a unique situation. I was going through physical therapy, and they said, okay, we want you to do X number of hours of physical therapy a day, and then we want you to go out on the base. This is Yokosuka Naval Air Station, or Yokosuka Naval Station, I guess it was. And they said, we want you to find a job to do something. Well, we're not doing therapy or anything, you got to do something. So I'm walking around looking for something to do, and I hear gunfire. So I go over there, and there's a rifle range, and there's guys shooting M1 Garands that had been converted to 7.62, and they were holding a naval 12th Naval District competition with these M1 Garands. So the old chief who was running the place, actually he was a first class then, but his name was Charlie Bover. He saw me and he says, "Hey, you want to shoot?" I said, "Sure." So he gave me the M1. He says, "You know how these work?" I said, "I'd shot an M1." So I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, go up to the firing line." So I went up to the firing line and shot and won the match. so that was my first Navy rifle match. It was while I was in the hospital at Yokosuka. Then there was also some Marines shooting, and they were shooting pistols as well as rifles. And they said, "Hey, you want to come and shoot with us at the pistol range?" I said, "Oh, there's my job." So I went with them to the pistol range. Well, it turned out I could shoot better than any of the Marines, so they gave me I had green SEAL uniforms which fit kind of in with their green Marine Corps uniforms. So I went all over Japan shooting with the Marine Corps pistol team, and that's what I did for my job until they released me out of the Yokosuka Hospital.
So that's when you joined. Is that the Navy Rifle and Pistol team?
No.
Okay, but you end up later on, you joined the Navy Rifle and Pistol team.
Yeah. I came back from Vietnam, and the commanding officer, Captain Lyons, said, we want you to, what do you want to do? He says, you want to go to the CISM team? Or CISM team is acronym for a military Olympics team, which includes swimming, running, obstacle course, shooting. And I said, "No, I don't want to do that." I said, "Let me try out for the Navy rifle team." So I tried out for the Navy rifle and pistol team, and I made the 11th Naval District rifle and pistol team, and then went to the All-Navy and made the All-Navy team. And we went to, this was in '70, I went to Camp Perry, and I was what they called the Virgin on the Navy rifle team. Every year, the main rifle teams from the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Army, they've got to have 2 guys on their team who've never been to Camp Perry before, and they just call them virgins. And so I was the virgin on the Navy rifle team. I had been shooting these excellence and competition matches all the way along, from the fleet matches down in Norfolk all the way up through the inter-service matches in Quantico and the all-Navy matches in anyway, I had shot leg matches, what they call excellence and competition matches, in Annapolis, Quantico, and down in Norfolk. And I had accumulated enough points that I only had to win one more match to distinguish in my first year. Well, I didn't do it. I finished up 2 points short of the 30 points I needed, so I finished out shooting the M1 Garand to distinguish in San Diego when I came back to the SEAL Team Reserves back in San Diego. So I distinguished in '71 with the rifle, and then I didn't shoot pistol anymore for several years, and I didn't get to compete with the pistol until I was once again on the Navy rifle and pistol team as an officer, and then I distinguished with the pistol, and I am the only person listed in the distinguished book as a second-class petty officer distinguished with a rifle and a lieutenant commander with a pistol. So.
And I know you may downplay this, but but by most accounts, you were the Navy's top shooter for several years.
Well, they have what they call the all-Navy match, and the all-Navy match is both a rifle and pistol match and a long-range match, and so I won that several times. In which times, sometimes I won the rifle, sometimes I won the pistol, sometimes I won them both. So for 10 years or so, I was the guy to beat in the Navy.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Can you explain? We talked a little bit about this. The box here with talking about the distinguished. Can you talk about what it takes to become a distinguished marksman for rifle and pistol?
Yeah. Well, it's what they call an EIC match, excellence in competition. It's set out on percentages. They give one gold 10-point medal for every 100 shooters. They give 2 silver medals, 8-point medals per 100, and they give 4 bronze medals, which are 6-point medals for every 100 shooters. So we seldom had even 100 shooters in the Navy because the Navy's marksmanship program pretty much dissolved shortly after the war, and you had to get command support to go to actual competitions because the monies that were designated for shooting, they had decided came out of what they called special services, and special services. So you were competing for support with the volleyball and softball and all of that stuff. You're supporting trip money, money to go shoot. So the command had to use what they called training money to send you to these matches, and a lot of guys' commands, some guy from a submarine or something, they had trouble getting the command to support them, and we had some good shooters. The Airedale Navy was the most supportive of the shooters because they were at naval air stations, and they had a program there where they could train on rifle ranges, and like Lemoore and China Lake and San Diego, and they all had teams, but the poor guys who were out on a ship, they had nobody supporting them, and they were lucky if they could scratch together any kind of support to go shoot those matches. So we never really had an out. If you were in the Marine Corps or in the Army, you were assigned to what they called the big team, the all Marine Corps team, the all Army team. All Marine Corps teams out of Quantico, Virginia. All Army team is I think out of Fort Benning. But that was their job. They got to shoot all day, practice all day, all free ammo, all and that's all they did. If you were in the Navy, you had to do your regular job, whether it was on a ship or if you were a SEAL. That's why it took me to a lieutenant commander level before I could ever distinguish with a pistol. And as it was, we were preparing for war in the Middle East, and I came off of a 2-day, 40-kilometer desert op, and where we had to pack all of our own water out in the Mojave Desert, and we had to come in. We came in, showered up, and I went to that pistol match and won it when I finally distinguished. And You know, I was so exhausted afterwards, I just went home and slept for 2 days. So that, you know, that was the way it was in the Navy. You had to do all your shooting in between whatever your other responsibilities were.
Is there a competition where all the military branches compete against each other?
Yeah, I do. It's called the Inter Services at Quantico, Virginia.
Did you ever do that?
I did.
How'd you do in
I
there?
took second in the leg match there. That's
So,
my silver medal there.
so you had a job and you still took second.
Oh yeah, well then I was on the All Navy team. When I took second in the leg match at the inter-service matches, I was actually on the All Navy team and assigned to that. But later on, that whole All Navy team thing went away, and the commands had to support it.
Okay, before we start talking about your other stuff that you did with the SEALs, let me ask you a couple questions. How did being in a combat affect you? Did it affect you at all?
You know, it probably sounds, I don't know, arrogant, but I never worried about being in combat as long as I was in a gunfight. I was scared to death when I was out of my element. And out of my element was in the air in an aircraft, in the ocean in a, when I was in UDT, I had what they call an SDV, a swimmer deliver vehicle. I was the pilot on a, and you know, the things they've got now that are sophisticated underwater vehicles with navigation device on it, we had none of that. We had a compass, and we knew nothing about how far our boat was actually traveling against currents and things like that. And so every mission that we went on with those old boats and stuff, I was out of my element. You know, as long as I was on the ground with a gun, I could deal with it. But it was not good when I couldn't control the situation. So.
Did you have any opinions? My dad was in Vietnam, so when he got back, there were a lot of protesters going on.
Yeah.
Did you have any interaction with those guys? Did you have any feelings about what they were doing, the whole anti-war thing?
I got out of the Navy and was in college probably a week later. So I ran into a certain amount of that in the college scenario. I went to JC first, Allen Hancock College in Santa Maria, and I ran into long-haired, pimply-faced kids who, well, first thing that they bugged me about was I had a nice Porsche car, and we made a little extra money in the SEAL team, so I had a nice car, and anyway, it's like a guy who's complaining about the only place in the world where you can go is China and be a free man, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, why don't you save your shekels and get your ass over there first chance you get and just see how much you like it? And he says, well, because capitalists like you don't allow me enough time to accumulate any funds to go over there. And I'm thinking, you idiot. But yeah, that was kind of about the level of interface I had with protesters. And then I got to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I had a political science course, and I had this cute little red-haired teacher about 25 years old who was my professor, and she was teaching political science. So she started pontificating about the war in Vietnam, and it was still going. you know, and she said, you know, we're over there killing those people that are just trying to be free and live. I said, wait a minute, lady. I don't know who told you that. I said, but here's what's actually going on. Somebody's been trying to take over South Vietnam or conquer South Vietnam for about 1,000 years, starting with the Chinese and going through the Japanese and so on and so forth. And they either beat them back or they let them take over and then they intermarry with them and they breed them out of existence. I said, what's really going on over there now is you pick a side. When you're in the South Vietnamese army, you're either South Vietnamese army or you're VC. You pick a side and you go fight. That's just the way it is over there. And as long as you got enough money and rice to keep your family alive, that's all that's important. They don't have any highbrow philosophical anything. They're just trying to survive over there. Well, she almost broke down in tears and took me to the dean and was going to have me thrown out of her class because, of course, I was a lot older than she was, and I'd been there and done that, and she had no credibility, and she thought that was just terrible that I'd ruined her class, you know. So, you know, I learned some stuff from that. I learned that I had to adjust to what people thought. And,
Yeah.
But you know, I got through it. So.
How about any opinion about Jane Fonda over there?
Oh, yeah, you know, she's a traitor, and she was never held accountable. You know, I have no use for any political Hollywood activists, you know, whether it's about the war in Vietnam or anything else. They should have no say in anything. And when they, you know, when they start pontificating about policy, I refuse to watch anything that they act in, or you know, but yeah, there was, yeah, you know, no rationalizing anything she did, and I had a guy on the Navy rifle team with me named Gordon Nakagawa. He was the last guy captured, shot down and captured in Vietnam, and he suffered consequences because of her activities. So.
Okay. Getting back to your SEAL career here, did the lessons learned in Vietnam, did they get translated back to the younger SEALs? Did what you learned, did that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, my philosophy was, once I got back from Vietnam, I went into the training mode. You know, I worked for a chief warrant officer named Bob Gallagher, commonly referred to as the Eagle. But I taught all the marksmanship courses, which was distressing to me because we did not have a sniper course. So I made it my goal when I got my commission and came back in as a 31-year-old ensign that I was going to change all of that. And I set up sniper courses and close quarter battle courses and marksmanship courses of all types, from pistols to long rifles. I also worked to develop guns that were appropriate for our mission. I was the main developer or the contractor on the soft offensive handgun, the Mark 23. And I also built the first 300 Win Mag sniper rifles when the rest of the military stayed with the 308 7.62 sniper rifles. We built the first sniper rifles. They were Macmillan stocked, Macmillan action 300 Win Mags. I hand loaded for them, developed the loads for them, and we also developed some other, like sniper security rifles, which were M14s with scopes on them, which were your spotter and your security guy. When you're a sniper, you can't look around for somebody approaching you and taking you out. So you got to have a guy with you there with a full battle rifle to protect you both. And we developed rather than trying to develop a 5.56 M16 style gun, we built scoped M14s, which are still today, the superior to anything they've got in the military inventory.
Yeah.
They abandoned the M14 because they were too hard to build and they were too expensive to build, and the AR platforms, whether they're a 5.56 or even a 308 style platform, the cast aluminum methodology of building those things is dirt cheap.
Yeah.
But M14 and an M1 Garand are both forged steel receivers that have to be machined. Very expensive compared to an AR platform.
Okay. Is it fair to say that you were the one, you instituted the Naval Special Warfare Snipers program, though?
I what?
You were the one who instituted the Naval Special Warfare.
That's fair to say, yeah.
Okay. Okay. What did that did?
Well, it started out, we used to send 2 men at a time up to Camp Pendleton to shoot with the Marine Scout Sniper program.
Okay.
And part of the Scout Sniper program was you got to shoot a tow missile at the end for the top 2 shooters in the class. Well, after we had provided the top 2 shooters for 3 classes in a row and no Marines got to shoot tow missiles. They were practice tow missiles, but still very expensive. Anyway, they said, you're no longer welcome at the Marine Corps Sniper Course. So I said, well, let's develop our own sniper course. And I also had a need for a 50 caliber sniper rifle course because we needed 1,500 meters to test the rifle, and there was no 1,500 meter ranges in San Diego. So I built a 1,500 meter range. Actually, it was 1,500 meters overflight, but it was just 1,200 meters on the impact area. But anyway, we built a whole range at Pendleton just for sniper rifles, and started our own course. And I also incorporated civilian long-range shooters to help coach our guys. I made my guys go out and shoot against the civilians in the state championship at Coalinga. And those guys are all good guys, and women too, really good women shooters. And I would let my guys shoot with them and learn how to read wind and hold hard and judge how much wind's going to move your bullet. And so we started our sniper course there. Subsequently, they moved the sniper course back to Camp Atterbury in Indiana. But that's kind of the history of the whole sniper course.
What do you think you guys were doing that was better than the Marine Scout Sniper? I mean, you guys won several years in a row. What were you doing that was...
You gotta realize that I had guys that had perfect eyesight, physically much better condition than anybody else in the military, and they're all alpha personalities. They hate losing. We have an old saying in the SEAL team, pays to be a winner. So that's the mentality that these guys have. So hard to beat a SEAL at anything, but particularly something like that he's good at, and he has good equipment. Of course, our guys had nothing but the finest equipment, and I hand loaded for all of them.
Yeah.
So that's one advantage we had. So we would always win the small command championship in the Navy matches because I had it was a 4-man team event. I had 4 SEALs there. Poor other guys, you know, they got a cook off a ship and a radio man, and you know, it wasn't fair, but that's the way it was.
Staying along a little bit with the topic about SEALs and it pays to win, and in the course of your career, who do you think were some of the better special forces that you dealt with around the world? Is there one that you'd put over another?
Well, you know, the guys I typically worked with were Delta guys.
Okay.
And that was mostly in conjunction with weapons development. I never actually operated with them.
Okay.
And these guys that I worked with were good guys, but none of them were competition shooters. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is this thread of resentment in both the Marine Corps and the Army that guys who are on the big rifle team aren't doing their duty. They're not going in the field and actually being troops. They're back practicing to win the national championships, and they're living an easy life. You know, go to the range every day, shoot practice, come home, be with the wife and kids. These other guys are deployed all over the world, living in a tent, or you know. So there is a resentment. I remember when I was on the admiral staff for a while, and there was a Marine Corps colonel on the admiral staff named Digger Odell, and he meets me and he says, "I hear you're one of them yellow-glassed gravel belly shooters," you know. And I said, "Well, I may be a yellow-glassed gravel-bellied shooter." I said, "But what's wrong with that?" And he says, "Well, when do you do an operating?" And I said, "Well, if you look at my record, you see I got a few operations under my belt too. I have seen the elephant." But I mean, there is that resentment in the Marine Corps and the Army for guys who are on the big team, kind of stay in Quantico and practice, and don't operate a lot. So.
Right. But getting away from the shooting in general, I'm just talking about the special forces.
Yeah, well, I've never operated with any of these other special forces except for the 2 years I spent with the SAS in Australia.
Okay. How were they?
They were great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was over there supposedly to exchange ideas. What it turned out, I lapsed into my normal, what I do. I taught their sniper course, and I taught their CQB course, their close quarter battle course. And I also tested new guns for them. They wanted to replace what they call the SLR, the self-loading rifle, which is a copy of an FN FAL built in Australia, and the Browning P35 pistol. And so they wanted me to test the new 5.56s that were out there, which included the Austrian AUG and the Glock pistols, and so I tested them all, gave them a report on all of them, and I don't even know what they shoot today. That was an '82, so they have long since gone to do that. But that's what I did while I was in Australia, and I won their Australian Rifle Championship and their Australian Pistol Championship.
Do you have a preference for handgun caliber, like 45 versus 9?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, what is it?
It's 45. I
Okay.
mean, there's never been any question about that, but the contention was that the 45 was too hard to master, recoiled too much for the ladies, the girls, and the lesser men that were having to shoot the 45, and then the engineering aspect or mentality of pistols is, if you can't shoot a pistol well, shoot it a lot. So you want high capacity magazines. I'm living proof of the fact that 7 rounds in a mag is enough. You got to change mags, but 7 rounds can get you through a lot. And especially if you got somebody else loading mags for you, which I did have when Dick Barr regained consciousness. He reloaded magazines for me while they were shooting at us. So the quote experts have engaged me in this argument a number of times, and I have shot people with a 9mm. Not a lot of people, but I have shot people. Our silenced weapon was called a hush puppy, which was a silenced 9mm. But anyway, without going into detail, the argument goes something like this. You know, I think that the 9mm is better because blah, blah. And I say, how many people have you shot with a 9mm? Well, none. I said, well, how many people have you shot with a 45? None. I said, well, I've shot people with both, and I'm here to tell you the 45 works better. So that's as far as the argument ever goes.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, I heard a rumor that there was an incident where you had to shave your beard and you were not happy.
I think that's overblown. I got the word that I had to shave my beard. When I left for Australia to do my 2 years in Australia, I had a beard. When I was over there, the word came back that you know, that the new admiral, chief of naval operations, whatever, said no more beards.
Mm-hmm.
So I shaved it off, but you know, I liked wearing a beard, and you know, I think it was appropriate, you know, and so, but it came back, you know, so of course the politics of the day had nothing to do with beards. It had to do with who was in charge and how much power they had. But,
all right, well, let's switch gears then. Let's talk a little bit about leadership. As you and I talked about this beforehand, obviously I know somebody that worked under you, and he said he was a young SEAL and you scared the shit out of him, but you took care of your guys.
Oh.
And nobody messed with your guys. So let's start here. Do you think leadership is innate or learned?
Well, I think leadership is greatly influenced by doing tours as enlisted before you become an officer. So if you are a warrant officer who has ascended to regular officer, or if you were a enlisted man who went through officer candidate school and came back in as an officer, you have a vastly different idea of leadership than a guy who, for instance, comes from the Naval Academy.
Yeah, so you were explaining the difference between people that had been, you know, basically non-commissioned officers versus, and had done tours in the field as opposed to coming out of the Naval Academy.
Right. Or a guy who had been to OCS directly out of high school, went to college, went to OCS,
Mm-hmm.
and then went to the teams
Yeah.
with no enlisted experience. And I think this is probably universal in all of the branches of the service. The prior enlisted officers have a different perspective on what's expected of your enlisted men. you know, they have all kinds of courses that they teach. I can't remember, one was called Navy Inman, and somehow they had followed the letter M to and there was branches on each leg of the end which related to what you should do to be a successful leader. And so I sat through the course, thinking, this is a bunch of bullshit. You know, these guys know nothing about leading SEALs anyway. So they interviewed me after the class and said, "What do you think of the class?" And I said, "Well, it's fine, but doesn't work for me." "Well, what do you think leadership should be?" I said, "For me, leadership is I tell my guys what to do and they do it. And that's the end of the story. There's no more discussion. That's the only thing they do." And, they're going like, "Oh, well, you've got kind of a bad attitude." And I said, "Probably do, but that's what works for me." So, anyway.
But as your leadership skills, do you think you learned it over time, or do you think you had it from the beginning?
You learn it from your officers as an enlisted man. You learn that, this guy is who I want to be. If I was ever in charge, I would want to be like this guy. Or this guy is just a total asshole and I am never going to be like him. So you kind of learn through experience.
Yeah.
What works and what doesn't. But the main thing is, you never ask your enlisted men to do anything that you won't do yourself. And that includes what you eat, how you recreate, how you limit them. You can't tell them don't do this and then you go do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the things that really irked me about, like, the Naval Academy guys. They wanted to go out and get drunk with the enlisted guys. I said, this will not end well. First of all, you tell your guys, if you're going to get drunk, control your situation. Don't put yourself in a position to, you're going to regret. And then you get a young officer out there and he gets blotto drunk and makes an ass out of himself. That's not leadership. It's interestingly, I had a former officer call me up and apologized to me for our time together, and he said, I was a bad officer, and I want to apologize to you. I was a drunk, and I'm sorry that, and it's no big deal. I mean, I got along fine without him.
Wow.
He disappeared, and so.
During your career with the SEALs, what was the biggest change you think you saw in your organization?
When I was first in the SEAL team, you could do almost anything and get away with it because they looked at you like you were a crazy SEAL, and so therefore you had to give them the benefit of the doubt because they were crazy. That gradually started to change about the time I was probably a lieutenant. And we became more politically correct. The SEAL Team 1 home station is in Coronado, and we would do demonstrations for the public like every 4th of July. And in the early days, you know, there was a SEAL getting in a fight somewhere in Coronado almost on a daily basis, at least on a weekly basis. Coronado cops kind of, you know, the mayor, and all, yeah, there are SEALs, so we're going to, but later on, we had our own admiral, and the admiral was there in Coronado, and things started to change, you know, and for the enlisted and the officers, it used to be you could get away with a DUI if you were an officer, but then things changed, and man, if you got a DUI, you were gone. Hey, you were, and so, you know, everything started having this political aspect to it that, you know, it's kind of like they wanted you to be a SEAL still, but they kind of wanted to keep you in a cage somewhere and then bring you out when they needed you, and not have you running around town and being a SEAL the rest of the time. So
Yeah.
so that's kind of changed, and of course once we got our own admiral and started, you know, having some notoriety as to being, you know, influencers, you know, like taking out bin Laden or whatever, you know, that we were more than just a speck in the Navy. We were actually a, you know, influencing force in the Navy. That, you know, things changed, and quite frankly, I liked it a lot better the old way, you know.
Yeah, so something that you just said. What's your opinion on, you know, I always think of the SEAL guy, like when you first started, nobody even knew what you guys did.
That's right.
So
And we
what's,
wanted it that way.
yeah. So what's your opinion now of some of this notoriety that some of the SEALs are getting for some of the things that they do? What's your take on those?
Well, I haven't walked in their shoes. I'm particularly concerned that, you know, the op tempo and the people returning from Afghanistan and Iraq are suffering symptoms that we never suffered in Vietnam. I mean, we had a couple guys that tripped off, there's no doubt, but I just think they got a harder row to hoe now, and they got things, you know, they're taking drugs now to enhance performance. They're you know, doing stuff that is, in my opinion, not good for them. And either they're overloading themselves to the point where they're mentally breaking down. And I had nightmares and stuff when I came back from Vietnam. My wife would get out of bed and go stand in the corner because I was violent, you know, for a couple of years after we were married. And it kind of went away.
That just went away over time, or did
Yeah, I just quit doing it, you know. It was always fighting somebody. I'd swing my arms around and move around, you know, get out of the way. But these kids now with you know, they get these traumatic brain injuries from IEDs and all that stuff. You know, I had none of that. You know, so.
But what about the publicity do you think that that's good? I mean, some of these guys are getting publicity for doing specific things. What do you think about that?
I think it's wrong. I think you know, they signed a non-disclosure agreement, how to keep their mouth shut. But you know, I see these guys who are politicians now, and you know, I don't know how much time they did as a SEAL team, but they're obviously, none of them are career SEALs because they're out doing other things now. And some of them seemed like all right guys to me, but some of them, you know, did a 4-year tour and then are out, and you know they're just another guy, but they hold that trident up as some sort of special. You know, they did that, and therefore they ought to be given more consideration. But you know, they, like I said, the old guys didn't write books, didn't make movies or anything. But there is a I don't know. Did you see the Learning Channel video?
No.
There is a Learning Channel video called "A Soldier's Story from the Rivers to the Sea," which they interviewed me for, and Dick Barr, the pilot who was flying the Hilo, and Bob Gormley, who was the guy who was CEO of Dev Group when Panama went down. The three of us are the SEALs in that movie. It's a riverboat and SEALs video, but you know, that's about as much notoriety as I could stand.
Do you have an opinion about the creation of SEAL Team 6?
Well, Marcinko asked me how come I wasn't in it, and I said, well, Dick, I hated the East Coast every minute I was there, first of all, and second of all, I doing some stuff out, you know, with the snipers and stuff out on the West Coast that I thought was important. So it was kind of a Marcinko had kind of a mafioso mentality, and he was in charge, and he told the boys what he wanted them to do, and they pretty much fell in line, and that wasn't my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Marcinko was over in Vietnam with me, and he was in the bar drinking, and I was out there killing Viet Cong. So, you know, I went out 2 out of 3 nights, and that's...
Okay. I'm curious, when you're with the SEALs, is there any sharing of techniques between, like, say, you guys and Delta Force, or you guys and, you know, Green Berets? Is there any?
You know, I can't speak to the last, you know, I've been out since 95,
Okay.
so, you know, 20 years have passed.
But when you were in, was there?
No.
No?
Well, we went through Ranger School, and we went Jungle Warfare School, and stuff like that. There were Army schools,
Okay.
jump school. But no, you know, I mean, when you're talking small units, like we were, in those days, we were 7-man squads in a 14-man platoon. You know, the Army didn't have anything like that. I mean, they had a Green Beret A-team, but yeah, we had no logistical backup like they had. So, and we were also capable of working water where they weren't. So that was kind of separated. Then the Army took over the underwater swim school in Key West, Florida, and tried to incorporate some of our techniques into their special forces. I don't know where that went, but I don't think it went very well.
Okay.
So,
What's your preferred handgun?
1911.
What's your preferred rifle?
Well, my preferred rifle, per se, for what I do, is a Model 70 Winchester. But for a combat rifle, I think the M14 was the best rifle ever built.
Okay.
For combat.
How do you become a good shot?
How do you become a good shot?
Yep.
Well, it's like anything else. You just do it a lot, practice, and you learn. There's, particularly with the pistols, there's just technique that you develop. I mean, the guys that are good are separated by tenths of a second in how well they do whatever they're doing, whether it's shooting plates, shooting targets, shooting whatever, where they start in the holster and assume multiple targets that are good guys, bad guys, you know. That's all well and good, and I think it's a nice sport, and but it has little to do with being in combat. You know, I mean, in combat you got to do whatever the situation requires. It's not a game, and it's not set out in a certain way. So, you know, I trained with my sniper rifle. I never shot it. First sniper mission I went in, and we got shot down, and I got sent to the hospital. So, you know,
Yeah.
all that good training and you know, but they've had at least 3 rifle changes since I was running the 300 Win Mag program, and I think they're on a cartridge called 300 Norma now.
Mm.
So, but I believe that the real secret to getting good is compete at the highest levels against the other best shooters, you know. And I used to send my snipers to the national championships. You know, we would, even if we had to pay our own way, we would go and shoot, and you know, we held our own.
Yeah. So, I think this is true. You've been married over 40 years?
Yep.
How do you-
47.
47 years. Any advice? How do you make a marriage work?
Pick a good wife to start with. My wife has put up with, you know, situations where most wives would just say, "I'm done with this," and leave. You know, I can think of when I came back from a 6-month tour in the Philippines and changed from SEAL Team 5 to SEAL Team 1. And the CO said, "We need you to go back to the," getting my stories confused here. Anyway, my wife was a month from delivering my first baby, and my CO said, how do you like being at SEAL Team 1? And she said, "Well, I'd like for my husband to be here when I'm having my baby." And he said, "Well, we need him over in the Philippines, so we're going to send him over there for 6 months." And you know, she said, "I made it back in time. I made it back in time for the baby by a week." But you know, most women wouldn't abide that. So
Yeah. Any advice for young people looking to go into the military?
well, hopefully with Hegseth, things are going to change. But the military has been an abysmal mess for the last 4 years, and I would not advise anybody to go in and under those circumstances. But it remains to be seen how much they're going to clean it up. One thing they got to do is you can't pay a guy to be something like a SEAL or in the military in general a minimum wage while some guy playing baseball or playing football is making millions a year. The guy's going in there, in the case of a SEAL, he's jumping out of airplanes into waters filled with sharks at night and going to places in the world where everybody's trying to kill you, and you're paying him minimum wage. Now you get a little extra pay for what they call hazardous duty, but it's, you're a professional athlete. You don't get paid anything close to what a professional athlete goes. Yeah. And that's one thing that I would do if I was in Hegseth's shoes. I would ensure that people who are specialists are really good at what they do get paid for it. And they make it attractive, make it romantic, Frogmen were kind of like professional athletes. We had gals that hung around just to see a frogman. And, that mystique still is around, but it's not that's not just the thing. It's actually the reputation and the high regard that's missing for the military. SEALs are a little better off than some of the other guys, but even, I always think the Marines get short shrift because they've been spec ops from day one, and they're out there doing the hard stuff. Nobody really recognizes it or pays them for it.
Yeah.
So,
RJ, how would you like to be remembered?
Well, I really think that if you were to ask the guys of my vintage, what did RJ do for the teams? I taught them how to shoot. Yeah. And this distinguished stuff that we're talking about, there's at least 12, if not more now, SEALs that are either distinguished or double distinguished in the competitive program. And they had to do all that on their own, no support from the military. There's no Navy rifle team anymore or anything else. They just went out and did it.
Yeah.
Bought their own equipment, bought their own gear. So, if I'm remembered as the guy who really taught SEALs how to shoot, that would be plenty good for me.
Fair enough. RJ, thank you very much for the interview. Really appreciate it.
All right.
While making this episode, many articles, as well as a chapter from the book More of the Deadliest Men Who Ever Lived by Paul Kirchner, were used as reference materials. As drafts of this episode were created, RJ offered technical advice on the type of guns that he had mentioned during his episode, as well as the photos that were being used during his interview. Corrections were made based on his expert advice. One point RJ wanted to make clear was that he was not sure, nor did he believe anyone else was sure of the exact number of people that he had killed on March 23, 1969, and he did not want the facts to get exaggerated. In at least one article located on sitem1911.com, there was a reference to the rescue chopper coming in and counting 37 dead Viet Cong soldiers at a distance from 3 to about 150 yards. This fact was discussed with RJ, who argued against this number and simply stated that he believed that the helicopter and crew, who were under heavy fire, were far too busy to be counting the number of dead soldiers who had been shot. RJ has a good point, but I think it's fair to say that as RJ held off the enemy fighters for about 40 minutes with a handgun, whether it was 37, 15, or 10, it was certainly more than one soldier that the Navy wanted to give him credit for.